Okay, we're sitting here with Don Cosby, our county historian, and today I'm going to ask Don a couple of questions about the early days of television in Daviess County. I thought it would be curious, the people might like to know what it was like when this new technology, the new media came along, and how it changed the way that people went about their daily lives in Daviess County. So Don, I'll start with just ask you a question. Do you know about what year it was that people in Washington or people in Daviess County got their first television sets and what they watched on them, if they could watch anything?
Well, I can't come up with the exact date, and you probably can do a little research and find me totally wrong, but I can relate to that period of time because I was growing up in high school at the time, and I can remember the first television set that I ever seen, and some of the things surrounding that period of time I never will forget. You know, at that period of time, the first television set was it came to Washington was owned by Gaylord Palmer, and of course I ended up later on, several years later on, after I got through high school and did my 4 years of service time, came back and was hired by Gaylord and managed their appliance department on the second floor of the store, and that of course resulted in TV, and that the recording industry did an about face. In fact, it changed from the old shellac record 78 to the little 5-inch 45 records with the big hole in the middle. So I am familiar with all that period of time, but the first, getting back to the first televisions, I was in high school in 1947, and the first TV set that I ever saw was like I said, was owned by Gaylord Palmer, and he owned Palmer Electric. He was a real promoter. That if it was to be something revolutionary, it seemed like Gaylord had his part right in the middle, you know. But 1947 is the first time I saw television, and he had advertised in the newspaper and on the radios also that he would be bringing a TV and attempt to show the World Series in 1947, and this was to be done at the corner of Main Street, where the stitching post is today. At that location, that was where the old Hyatt Hotel was, and in the lobby of the Hyatt Hotel, he had erected an indoor antenna. There was no such thing as cable at that period of time, of course, but if you got any kind of a TV signal at all, it had to be gotten through an antenna. And most of them, of course, as time went along, there was everybody had to have an antenna on top of their house in order to get any kind of a signal. But he was going to attempt to broadcast the 1947 World Series, which was quite an attraction. Any of the younger people my age at the time, we all thought that was great, and everybody descended upon the Hyatt Hotel. The lobby, of course, was just jam-packed with people, almost elbow to elbow. There were so many people in there, I have no idea how many, but it was really crowded. And of course, he had gone so far as to erect a indoor antenna in there, and because the only place he could pick that up was out of a station out of Louisville, so that was quite a long distance. And actually, that was far. They were going to broadcast, of course, and if you were as close as much closer to Louisville, he might have been able to do that. But that encompassed a distance of over 100 miles, and so when the game started, he was trying to adjust the TV. Of course, the tube at that time in the picture tube was not rectangular as it was in later times. It was round, and so he was making an attempt to try to adjust it. But occasionally you would get an image, but that's about all that you got, because the picture that he got, any image, there was so much snow on the screen. It was, you couldn't even make out any detail at all. So it turned out to be a lost effort, but at least he tried. But that's the first time I ever saw it. In that period of time, also, we were experiencing a change in the broadcasting of radio. Radio was a big thing, and of course, in 1948, he also was worked hand in hand with the WFML, which at that time was our local radio station. They started that in 1948, and the first broadcast that he attempted to do was the 1948 Washington sectional, basketball sectional, and that, of course, was done from the radio tower, which was on top of 11th Street Hill. So if you extend going south on 11th Street, you go up to an incline, and of course right on top of that hill was where the tower was. And so he had gotten things pretty well taken care of as far as transmitting the signal, but the problem there once again was being able to broadcast it. So it got right down to the latter few days. In fact, the week of the sectional, he still did not have a tower up. They had started to erect the steel tower, but they were running out of time. So panic began to set in, and so finally he contacted the Washington the City of Washington Light Company, and they erected a 75-foot tower, which was put up there on top of that hill, and they actually did broadcast that tower. But Joe Edwards was, of course, the announcer at that time, and so I remember that vividly.
So in those early days, like in the late 40s through the 1950s, how many people would you say owned a television set? Like if you went around a block of houses, How long did it take for it to become common, something that most people had in their house?
Well, it virtually exploded, as far as demand was concerned. Once they found out that they could receive a signal, and of course, if you had an antenna on top of your house and an individual tower, you could receive a signal out of Evansville and Terre Haute, and then of course some of them would even attempt to turn the antenna around and try to pick up the Louisville channel as well. But as far as demand was concerned, it virtually exploded, and in the course of just 2 or 3 years, there were numerous people who had, but in the very beginning, hardly anybody had it for the first 2 years. But of course, when I came back from service, I went to work for Palmer Electric and managed their appliance department upstairs there and the record shop. And stereo, of course, was a big thing because it converted from high definition radio to stereophonic sound, and that was a big time in history also.
Of the popular things to watch in the early 1950s, the mid 1950s, what did people watch and what did they talk about on television?
Well, they were able to pick up through transmission all of the things out of the major cities, New York and but you should have given me time. I could have given you a whole bunch of examples of those, but and I did a section on that, I think, in one of the books that I wrote, but I can't recall. Fibber McGee and Molly, of course, was one. Dragnet was another series that they had on, and of course the westerns were really big. Rawhide, one of the early westerns the westerns were really popular early,
Do you think that when television came along, how did it affect people's social lives or what they did for entertainment? Like, did people go out less, or did they have more gatherings at their houses? Do you remember, or do you know if that sort of changed the way that people lived in any way?
Well, yes, it was prior to the advent of television. Radio was the only thing, and I'm about to lose my voice. I'm not used to talking so much. But the radio was the only, and of course, when I grew up, we always had, on Saturday night, as far as the young people were concerned, we had the hit parade. It was nothing other than recordings, of the popular songs of the day, and that's where we, as young people, picked up a lot of those programs.
Well, I think we'll call it for an interview for today. So thanks, Don, for talking to us. And
I'm about out of my throat's about to go south on me. So I appreciate Ken the effort to be able to talk about and recall some of those days. It's as you get older, they always said that people, as they age, they love to reminisce. So this is part of all that.
And thanks everybody for watching, and have a good afternoon. We'll see you next time.
Okay.